Parenting is hard. It can also be rewarding, but getting through the grind to the good stuff can be a real struggle. And all of us could use some inspiration, encouragement, or just a reminder that we aren't alone on this journey. Sometimes even parents need a timeout.
Hi parents, welcome to Parents Time Out. This is the time during the week where we gather with other parents to ask questions, share ideas, and learn from other experts, other parents, because we know that parenting is done best in community. So we fight isolation by gathering together on Wednesday night. And tonight we're talking about leading our kids spiritually. Oh, and I should say, I'm Kim Botto, and I host this, and I lead Kids Club and Student Ministry at Crossroads, and I'm the mom of 5 and the grandma of, it's still holding at 7. Within the next 2 weeks, it should be 8. So tonight we're talking about leading our kids spiritually. And as parents, I know when people have told me, hey, you're the parent and you're responsible for leading your kid, it sometimes feels really overwhelming. Or we can wonder, what does that even mean to lead our kids spiritually? So tonight we have 2 guests on who are going to talk about some ideas from their own families as they parent their kids. So we're going to welcome Andy Reider and Jennifer Baker. Hey guys. Andy is the community pastor at Crossroads Dayton. He's also the dad of 3 adorable little children. Gosh, Ella's 5.
Yes.
And then Andrew he's not even a year old yet, is he?
He's just turned 1.
Okay. And then he's married to my friend Rachel. And Jennifer Baker. Jennifer is the mom of Jordan, a son, and she's married to Dave. So welcome, you guys. And as we're waiting for people to hop on, I'm going to ask you a question. And if you're watching, I'd love for you to respond in the comments. And the question is, so we're talking about leading our kids spiritually tonight. So what is your favorite tool that you use when talking to your kids about faith?
For me, it's our car ride. I know as a boy mom, having him in the back seat, me in the front, we're not having to have eye contact, and we can just talk freely in the car, and I can kind of read in the rear view mirror his enthusiasm for the topics of conversation we're having.
An automobile. That's
Yeah.
great. And you know what? For boys, that is really good because I have 2 boys, and well, they're men now. But when I wasn't making eye contact with them, like when we were in the car side by side, the conversation went so much deeper. So that's a great suggestion. And then Tasha, who's watching, she said her 2 favorite tools are the Bible. That's a good one, Tasha.
Classic.
Bible. That's in music. So that's good. What about you, Andy?
Well, I'll follow Tasha's lead. The Bible, yes, that seems like a solid answer that any person should answer, especially if they have pastor in their title. So yes, the Bible. But I am sure it's been talked about on this before. But if you have not read the Jesus Storybook Bible, go buy it right now. Like, just stop listening to me. Go buy it. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing. Amazing. We have worn out 3 of them, and we got the audiobooks, and those are just all scratched. But I'd say the Bible, also one for us that we've been sort of leaning into, especially since COVID. So we've got a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. Meals in our house are insane. Like, trying to get the necessary caloric intake into these 3 tiny human beings in a set amount of time to also get them to sleep is just rough. So one of the ways that we've just kind of been helping make meals less crazy and try and, be caring for and investing in our kids spiritually by using those times to do 2 things. We'll read a Bible story. Thank you, Tasha. Read a Bible story out of either the Tiny Truths or the Jesus Storybook Bible. And then we'll just do high lows or happy crappies. We don't actually talk it that way with our 5-year-old. She would love it.
Good.
But high lows, and Yeah, and then we just use that as like, hey, great. Well, the high we should thank God for, and then maybe the low, maybe that's something we could pray about. You want to do that right now, and it's 97 seconds, but it is one of the things that just helps give the meal like a sense of rhythm and routine and direction.
Yeah, and so you're showing us that it doesn't have to be some big complicated thing. You're using things like mealtime, a Jesus Storybook Bible, which we put the link to it in the comments actually, or car ride. So yeah, I agree. And I can't emphasize enough the Jesus Storybook Bible. It was my mother-in-law. She was in her 80s. It was her favorite Bible because it just so beautifully tells the story, God's story, as one big interwoven story. And every story in the Jesus Storybook Bible and in the Bible itself points to Jesus. So yes, we love the Jesus Storybook Bible. Andy and Jennifer, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and who you are?
Jennifer, you want me to go first?
Go for it.
All right. A little bit more about me and my family. So I'm community pastor of Crossroads Dayton. I was the music guy at Crossroads Mason. I've been on staff for about 10 years now. I've sort of done the church thing for kind of my whole like professional career. I worked at the mall at Apple, and then I started sort of working at churches for a really, really, really long time. But I've got a 5-year-old, 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And even working in churches my whole life, I did not feel like that necessarily prepared me to grow or care for or invest in or train up my kids spiritually. Like there's just a whole different verbiage and language and set of tools that I think's necessary. So I definitely feel like I've been in learning mode at least since the day my oldest daughter Ella was born 5 years ago. But they're so much fun. It's life is crazy, but it's way sweeter and way more fun than it is crazy.
Yes, it is fun. So were you an Apple genius at the Apple
I was
store?
I was like the Apple pseudo genius. I was like,
Got it.
I'd work on your phone, but they wouldn't let me touch your computer because I'd probably break it.
Got it. Good to know. Good to know. Okay. Thanks, Andy. Jennifer?
Well, fun fact, we can't prove it, but my husband is pretty sure that Andy helped us once at the Apple store, way back when he worked there. So that's just a little side note for you. But so I'm Jennifer. I have one son and one husband, one dog. And we've been part of Crossroads for a long time, probably like 15 years. I started coming when I went to UC in college. And I never really felt connected or got to know anyone at Crossroads until I was a parent. And when I joined the moms group, actually at Mason, because Crossroads Dayton didn't exist back then, that was kind of where I found my people. And I would say too, that's been another really good tool for me in how I raise my kids spiritually, is learning from other parents. And self-care is, great childcare too. So being able to find people that I can learn from and just ask and don't and say, hey, this has been really hard. Like, how do you handle this? And having people who can share and just say, I know that stage sucks, but here's what happens next, or here's what you get to look forward to, or how I handled that. Those have been really, really powerful tools for me as I've come along in motherhood.
Yeah, and community is so important. We talk about that almost every week. And if you go to crossroads.net/groups, you can find all kinds of different groups, moms groups, men who like to drink beer, just people who, seriously, you put beer in and there's a lot of groups that'll pop up, but just people who want to get together. And it might be virtually now for some, and just talk about what's going on with your life and how God fits into that and answer questions of each other. I also want to point out, Michelle made a comment on the best tool for talking to her kids about faith. And she said they journal back and forth, good stuff or bad stuff. And we get in a rhythm of journaling regularly. And it gives them a chance to get their feelings out. I want to say I have a daughter who is an internal processor, and she had trouble a lot of times articulating how she was feeling about things. And so we did that with her. She would write down what she was thinking, And then she would just leave it closed up on my bedside table. So when it was time for me to read it, I'd read it. I'd write her something back, put it on her bed, and that went back and forth. And so, yeah, journaling is a great way to do that. So parents, if you have any questions of Jennifer and Andy, you can go ahead and put it in the comment. And I'm going to start with one. I talked about up at the front that parents are to be the spiritual leaders of their kids. I mean, it says it all throughout the Bible. Deuteronomy 6 is a chapter that talks about how we're supposed to talk about it with our kids all the time, laying down, while we're walking, when we get up. So Jennifer and Andy, when you hear that you as a parent are to lead your kids spiritually, tell us about what you feel when you hear that and what that means to you.
I think for me, it definitely feels overwhelming and weighty, and I lead kids ministry at a church. So it's odd how it feels, I don't know, I feel more confident or able, like helping someone else's child, but my own child, is a very different path to navigate. And at the same time, I think I've learned over the years to not stress about the things I wish I did better or I could have done this differently, and focus on the improvements that we do make, day to day. And we aren't where we were last year, and next year will be better, and just keep trucking along with that mindset.
That's right.
Yeah, that's really good. I Jennifer, I really like calling that out of like, hey, not to spend all the time like looking back on the things that you could have done differently. I heard somebody say recently, and it was personally really, really encouraging to me, because I totally resonate with that of like, I've worked at churches for a really long time, and this is profoundly exciting and challenging and crazy in its own ways. And so, but I heard somebody say recently, like, hey, with kids, if 60% of the things that you have planned are happening, you're killing it. Like if you're holding yourself to the standard of like, well, we had a chore chart and we planned to do all these things and I didn't get all of them done, or I didn't get all of the things done, man, like give yourself way, way, way more grace. Like we need to build in some margin for these tiny humans who have their own thoughts and minds and wills and things that are going on. And so just as a like parent, remind me to give myself grace, and I will hopefully do that for you as well. And the only other thought I would say is like, especially in this time of like COVID where there is no kids club. And so one of the tools that we had like weekly in our tool belt, that somebody else actually did that work for us by bringing them to kids club. And that's just not here in the same way anymore. You know who else didn't have like weekly services that they could drop their kids off and have them taught? Like anyone in the Bible. Like they didn't have kids club in the Bible either. And yet there's something about how God just continues to sort of lean in and equip us and give us what we need. Unfortunately, he doesn't seem to do it all like way ahead of time, like just to stockpile experience or wisdom. He generally gives it to us kind of one bite at a time. But that he's there with us and there for us in the midst of parenting.
That's right. That's good. That's good. Thank you, guys. And as parents, we're much harder on ourselves than our kids are. And they learn so much from us just by watching us. It's actually, unfortunately, it's more what we do than what we say. So, hey, we have a question from Kimberly. Any books that you'd recommend about how to spiritually lead your kids?
Can I go?
Yeah.
Go for it.
One that I would highly, 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 highly recommend. It's by Danny Silk. It's called Loving Your Kids on Purpose. Very, very, very good. I think it was probably a lot of the examples seem to be geared towards older kids, but the principles in it were really, really, really like helpful. And honestly, they've even shifted how I believe God sees me. in the way that he deals with me sometimes. I just think it's a fantastic sort of reframing of the traditional sort of parent-child relationship that's way, way more in line with the gospel, I think, in some important ways. So that's probably not like a hyper helpful description, but I really would recommend it. Loving Your Kids on Purpose by Danny Silk.
That's good. That is a good one. Jennifer, you have any ideas?
I think two. One is it's a general parenting book, but I just feel like it helped me so much be able to relate to my son better. And, you know, as a parent, that shapes how they see God. And so that's The Whole Brain Child. I'm drawing a blank on the author right now, but and then I think the second one is, as my son's getting a little bit older, and so he's coming into his own, and, you know, I can't just lay my faith on him and hope that he just accepts my faith as his own. So he's starting to ask questions and kind of wrestle with some things and develop his own thoughts. And I'm thankful that he's doing that at age 9 instead of age 20, because I still get to be a giant influence in the way that his questions get answered. And so we've been doing some work looking at some of the Lee Strobel books that are built for kids. So there's Case for Grace, Case for Christ, but they have kid versions. So I use those more as a reference tool. Like if he has a question, then, you know, we can look at that. We don't read the book per se together.
You know what that is? I did that with my kids. I got the kids versions or it might have been the teen version, Case for Christ, Case for Faith. And it gave me some vocabulary, just gave me some confidence in talking about their questions. Those are good ideas. If any of you have ideas for books, please put them in the chat. We'd love to hear them. And then we have some more questions. How do you build a sense of team in your families?
This one's really, really top of mind for us right now. We're in a spot where our kids are, especially Ella and Mariah, are old enough that they are experiencing like the tension of like, hey, there's limited amounts of attention or limited amounts of chocolate or limited amounts of whatever. And so they're in this place where they're recognizing like there's a level of sort of competition. And that's the thing that we really, really, really want to be careful of. One of many things. But so what we're trying to do is to help them recognize that they are not in competition with each other, that it is for the good of their brother and sister is for their good. And so we're at I think we're at like the foundational level of this stuff, but some of the things that have been helpful, is just language. Like language oftentimes shapes culture. And what we're talking about is building a culture of team in our families. And so we refer to ourselves as Team Reider, not all the time in like a weird way, but like regularly enough, we sort of salt and pepper it into the conversation. They're accustomed to hearing that. We do it when we celebrate things or when we go someplace, or when we see them do something good, when we see them share in a way that we didn't make them, or we see them help their sibling, we just call it out. Like, what do they say? The behavior that gets celebrated gets replicated. Yeah, like that's true with your Fortune 500 company as much as it is with your 4 and 5 year old. And so when we see them do things, we label it. Hey, man, Ella, that was so great. I loved how you helped Mariah. I loved how you shared what you had with her. That is being such a great sister, and that's because we're a team. That is being such a great sister. That's being such a great teammate. Stuff like that. We're trying to salt and pepper it in, like not overwhelmingly, but consistently and early.
Yes, language is so important, and I think if you have even something that you talk about that your family does all the time, and you gave some examples, Andy, but it could be something as simple as the Botto family sticks together. So when you're out on the playground and something's happening to one of the other kids, the siblings know, oh, that's right. Or you could just say, hey, Botto family sticks together. And then they go and do it. Now, my kids are older, so we actually have a mission statement that says, the Botto family is a fun, invitational, adventurous family that cares for the fatherless. Because part of being on a team is you know what you're working towards together. So, Sarah, that is a great question. Can we put Jessica's question up, please? Jessica said, my son's rejecting God at the age of 12, and my husband is an unbeliever. Jessica, that's hard. Thank you for asking that question. Well, I'll say, Jessica, first, I had years ago, there was someone, I had a mentor, and she was bedridden, but I would go and I'd meet with her like once a week. And I had a friend who did not believe in Jesus, and I was trying to convince her to believe in Jesus. My little friend Betty, she said, oh, honey, you can't preach her to Jesus. You have to love her to Jesus. And so, and I know that this is hard. And Sarah, it is, or not Sarah, Jessica, it's stressful, especially with a partner that's not helping you in this. But I would say introduce him, if there's a way to introduce him to other men who are believers that can help mentor and guide him. And it might not even be an adult. It might be an older teenager. I don't know if you are in a church community, but I think getting help from your church community, and know that this is not because of anything that you did. At this age, a lot of times they're making their faith their own. And so part of him rejecting God is him figuring out, okay, am I believing this because my mom and dad are believing this? Or am I believing this because I believe it? So actually, this could be really God working in him to figure it out. So I'd say continue to pray for him. I mean, when he's asleep, go in there and pray over his bed. I used to do that for my kids. I got a black eye once because they woke up and hit me, but that's a whole nother story. And you said, okay, you're saying you go to Mason, he doesn't want to go. That is okay. We're going to put you in touch. Beth Peary is behind the scenes on this call, Jessica, and we're going to get you in touch with some people that can talk to you about it. And lead students at Mason, because we want to help you and support you. But I want you to know you're doing a fantastic job, that he is able to openly and honestly tell you how he's feeling. So Jennifer and Andy, do you guys have other comments for Jessica?
I would just want to encourage you that this isn't the end of his story. You know, he's 12, and as someone who works with kids frequently in church, you know, I get to hear a lot of really great questions. And I see, you know, kids who I know, because, you know, they volunteer in kids club and they've been around church for a really long time, that their parents have a really strong faith. And those kids ask really hard questions, and they go through that time, like Kim was saying, where they're really wrestling with, do I believe this because I believe it, or because someone told me to believe it? So, yeah, I would just say, don't lose hope, and know that it is a great thing that he's talking to you. And one thing I do, because like I said, my son asks a lot of questions right now at 9, is take every chance I get when I have answered prayer, or when we hear of other families around us who are experiencing answers to prayers, to call that out. For me, that's really faith building when I see and hear and experience that. So pointing those things out and just reminding them, oh, hey, you know, we prayed for that, and look what Jesus did. I think that those things get in their minds, and, you know, they start to ruminate on that a little bit. So
that's so helpful, Jennifer. Thank you. And I love, this is why we do Parents Time Out, so parents can communicate with each other, and you get all these wise words from Jennifer. So thank you. Okay, I've got another question for you guys. Have you, as you're trying to lead your kids spiritually, you know, we want our kids to grow up and know and love Jesus. Have you ever been stumped by your kid? when you're talking about faith or Jesus?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think regularly, and I think there's sort of a misnomer. Like I think it's by design. Like think about this. Think about a human being is born basically able to do three things: eat, sleep, poop. Everything else, they need to be taught and they need to learn. And we just have to, like, this is honestly where I'm at, because one of my kids doesn't eat super well, one of my kids doesn't sleep super well, and one of my kids doesn't poop super well. And I'm just like, goodness, we gotta work on this. But I think this is by design. Like, God could have sort of had us, he could have figured out a more efficient way for us to reproduce ourselves and for, you know, kids to learn everything they need to know. I think there's something intentional in this, that he likes us being in this process. So just for me, sort of a humbling way that I have felt stumped recently. So before I was community pastor at Crossroads Dayton, I was a worship leader for 15 years or whatever. So church music was my thing. It was literally my thing. I realized, like, oh, my kids can't sit still to get through like half of a song. And I was watching like the Mostellers and the Hunts and some of my other good friends who lead worship on Facebook and stuff, and watching their kids just like totally engage with worship. And I was just like, how did you do this? And so I literally just called them and was just like, hey, I need to talk. How did you guys do this? And so we did a 3-way conversation, and they just gave me some input. And it was simple as like having things around. They're like, we just hung a guitar in our kids' room so that the likelihood that we would sing songs to Jesus with them was more often. And pretty soon they were asking for it before they go to bed. And so helping create opportunities where training is more likely to happen. It has its own kind of fruitfulness that isn't just like we threw it on the calendar, but looking for ways that you can kind of set the stage for the kind of good connections or learnings or growth. So anyway, to come back, like, I just think there's constantly going to be ways we need to level up. And so I hate to say that, like, I was stumped as a worship leader. I'm stumped with some discipline stuff right now that we're working through. I expect to be stumped with something else tomorrow. And I don't think that's broken. I think that's the nature of it, because God cares as much about me being grown through the process of being a dad as he does about my kids being grown through the process of being a child.
Right. And like, talk about that's so good, Andy. That's just simple. You're taking what you love, music, and using that to help grow them. But Kimberly just said that her 4-year-old's asking questions theologians have pondered and debated for years, which is awesome. That's great.
Amazing.
But also, if we go in the Bible, the word tells us that we're not going to understand everything fully here. In Corinthians, it talks about it's like looking in a cloudy mirror right now. And then when we are face to face with Jesus, we are going to see it all clearly then, which to me gives me a lot of freedom when my kids ask me questions that I don't know, or I just say, I don't know. I don't understand why we prayed for this every day for this period of time, and God didn't answer our prayers in the way that we had hoped. I don't know. It's okay. I think saying I don't know to your kids is one of the most powerful things. Or if they're asking questions about the Bible, getting the Bible out together, using the concordance in the back, which is kind of like would you say, like a dictionary sort of? I mean, you can look up the words, and then it helps you go to the scripture about it to look up what your kid is asking. So yeah, that's fun, Kimberly. We want to hear some of the questions your 4-year-old is asking too. So Jennifer and Andy, we are, oh my gosh, yeah, we're to the end of our time. So I'd love to know, are there any things that you would like to, just closing thoughts for our parents who are watching?
I think for me, probably just hitting that nail again on community and finding parents around you who are both in the same life stage you're in, but also finding someone who's a step ahead of you. I think that's so helpful to be able to have someone who's been there and can remind you in the hard times, like, hey, this is hard and it's going to pass. And also gives some perspective too. I remember when my son was a baby, and I was like, oh, this is the hardest thing. He won't eat, and potty training, and, but also, them kind of setting me straight and being like, hey, lady, it gets harder and the things get tougher to deal with. So, having that, I guess, runway to look ahead and understand that all of this is training me to be a better parent for him, as the stakes get higher, as we both, age together.
That's good. Yes. Always good to have somebody ahead of you and behind you. So Andy?
Yeah, I would say, and this might sound trite, but it's really been meaningful to me just as I sort of have reevaluated like my role as a dad. But there's the saying that God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called.
Yes.
Like in look through the Bible, like who in the Bible was ready to do the thing that God called them to? No, nobody. Like it was always somebody who was like really an underdog in most every way. And God gave them what they needed step by step. And I just think I think that's us as parents.
Right.
If we're expecting for this to be easy, if we're expecting like, yeah, I got the diaper phase on lock, it's going to change. Like it's going to change tomorrow. And so 1, give yourself grace for it. 2, level up with it. Like engage. I love the questions about books. Like this should be a learning, growing exercise for us. We should be having conversations with people who know more than we do. We should be like, you guys are doing this. This is a big deal. You guys are engaging your minds and your intellects and your emotions and your hearts and your wisdom and your community to be a better parent. And so being a great parent just doesn't happen by default. It takes engagement from us. And so just encourage you guys, more of that. It will serve you well.
It does. And we're going to thank you, Jennifer, and you both. And we just got a question I think is actually really good. So I think a lot of parents have. So let's do Sarah's question and then we'll sign off. And that is, share some of your family rhythms that help you build into your kids spiritually.
Can I go first?
What are some rhythms? Yeah, sure.
The first one I would say, and it sounds super churchy, but Sabbath. Like we have Sabbath. That's the Bible term for it. My kids know it as Sabbath/family fun day. And when they wake up, they know there's going to be Lucky Charms on their plate. It's a day that we do the things that are fun for us as a family, that are recreative for us, but it's a thing that grounds our week. And by the way, it's in the 10 Commandments and above, don't kill people. Like God takes this really important or really seriously. And I think it's an important grounding rhythm for our kids to understand there's a chunk of the week that is for them and for us that other things don't intrude on. So it might seem high bar, but I think to lean into that and to experiment with it, I think you'll see fruit even bigger than you expect.
Yeah, and on the Sabbath, it's supposed to be, it was practiced as a 24-hour practice where you didn't work. And I've seen families where they're just getting started. They might do it for just 4 hours. They do it Sunday night from dinner time till bedtime, or Friday night from Sunday night to from dinner to bedtime. But it doesn't make any difference what day, what time. Do what works for you. And let's see, was that Kimberly's question? No, Sarah's question. And another thing with that is the ritual of praying every night at dinner, or praying every night before bed, or praying in the car on the way to go to school, or get them their own Jesus Storybook Bible, or depending on the age of your kid, maybe a journal. And you could just have, maybe if you're practicing Sabbath on Saturday morning, the family members can sit around in a circle and read their Bibles and write in their journals together. So parents, if you're watching and you have a great idea for how to practice that, we'd love to see your comments here. But we're going to sign off now. Jennifer and Andy, thank you so much. And next week we'll be back with Jen Powers, who is from Tried and True Parenting. She works with a whole bunch of parents, so we can't wait to learn from her. So we'll see you next week, parents. Have a great week, and can't wait to see which of these things that we've learned from Andy and Jennifer tonight that you're going to try with your own family. Good night.
Good night.